Welcome back to AutoCrit's Coffee Break. I'm your host, Bekah Brinkmeier, best-selling author, author coach here at AutoCrit, and wearer of many hats. It is my pleasure to sit down with Rick Mendez today. Rick, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Becca. Nice to meet with you.
I just love these interviews because I get to learn about all the books that I need to add to my TBR. It's fantastic. Best part of my day, truly. But I would love to have you tell our audience a little bit about Rick the author. Who are you as an author? What inspires you? What genre do you write? The
Okay,
floor is yours.
sure. I can tell you that I had a 35-year technology career.
Mhm.
Towards the end of that, I wrote my first novel. It's called Growing Future Operators, which was a fictional story of school systems competing to teach DevOps. And I wrote that because it was a story been in my head forever, and I knew, my whole career as a technologist, my boss used to hate me because I wrote these giant emails and white papers and everything else. And so I just wanted to, try my luck at writing a full novel. I had so much fun with that process, the writing, the editing, the whole nine yards, that my wife and I sat down early in 23 and said, "You're getting to that point in time where it's time to start thinking about retirement." She said, "But I don't want you watching TV all day long. So what would you like to do in retirement?" I said, "Well, I think I've got many more books in me." I said, at that point, I hadn't even touched my favorite genre. And she said, "Oh, if you want to do that, that's great." So I retired before the age of 60 to become a full-time novelist. And as I tell people, I have an enchanted retirement because there's nothing better than playing with characters all day. So
There's truly not. We're living the dream, Rick.
yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. And I am I'm a full-time character wrangler as well. And it
Yeah.
is, some people ask, they're like, how do you come up with all of this? I'm like, I love that you think I'm in charge. No, my characters are the ones who are running the show half the
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Tell me a little bit about the genre that you write in.
Yeah, I call it crime fiction because the way I see crime books, there's traditional mysteries, procedurals, and thrillers.
Mhm.
My book kind of involves all three. There's parts of it that keep the reader on the edge of their seat. There's others I don't reveal who the killer is till very late in the book. And my crime scenes, I didn't want to do a crime book without making the crime scenes accurate.
Mhm.
So AutoCrit had a meeting with Lee Laughlin at one point last year. And so I saw that interview, bought his book, read his book, and was just like, this is for a guy who, was a technologist, didn't know much about police work except what I watch. It was like perfect. It just laid it out perfectly for me. So that helped a lot. So the next book is called The Chameleon Killer. It's currently in developmental editing. I have two rounds of developmental editing with Atmosphere Press. They're going to be publishing it, and I'm probably down to about a week, 10 days left on the first round of developmental edits, and then we'll do a second round after the my editor rereads all the changes I've made, and
Mhm.
he's going to get a book back that's probably 75% different than the original one I sent him. Just many, many changes. So.
That's always part of the editing process that can be both exciting and painful at the same time.
Well, it's funny because as I was writing the zero draft, I kept a list of edits I wanted to make when I was done.
Hmm.
And so then I spent about 5 months doing those edits, plus running all the AutoCrit reports against the book, especially things like repeat words, those kind of things. And so I get to a point with that book where I was like, I don't think I can possibly do any more self edits. It's time to hand this over to a professional editor and see what they find. And he did scare me a little bit because I was over in the East Coast in January because my mother passed, and I get this
I'm sorry to hear
call
that.
from Atmosphere Press. I'm like, "Yeah, who's this?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm your editor." I said, "Oh, cool." He said, "I'm going to send you my ideas for how to make the book better." I said, "Cool." So he sent me the stream of conscious 3-page document with just a million things on it, and I was like, "Oh boy!" First, I was like, so he had a call. And he said, "Don't be alarmed. You don't have to fix everything if you don't want to." I said, "No, my first crime book, so I want to make it as best as I possibly can." What I did is I took everything he gave me, built a Word document with a million tables in it to sort of break it up into like 7 areas. And then if it
Mm,
was per character, I got, a line for each character, where I hit those edits, like what chapter, what scene, that kind of thing. What I'm working on now is that he wanted more scenes for the killer because he thought
okay.
that would induce more tension. So I'm about halfway through those. And then I have dialogue fixes for what I call the minor characters, like the protagonist, her lieutenant, um, the killer. I have, basically very different dialogue for the three of those, but all the other characters sort of sound alike. So now I have to go find some ways to tweak their voices so they're a little bit different.
That can be the challenge. I know I write in multi POV sometimes, and just making sure because I write so much and I have so many different stories going at any given time, giving everyone that distinct voice, making sure that their actions and their dialogue and their mannerisms and how they interact with other people stays true to that character all the way through. It is both exciting and challenging, I would say, to make sure that you're really having that immersive experience because you want people to relate to your characters. You want people to feel something when they read your book. Um, when you're thinking about this editing process and you have sounds like a very methodical way of going through your editing, what is one tip that you could give someone who's maybe just starting their editing process and feeling very overwhelmed?
uh, the thing that helped me with both books is you have to break the process down into smaller pieces. Don't think,
Mm,
oh my God, I have 1,000 edits in this book. Think, let's look at the first scene in the first chapter and see if we can edit that one. And then once you get rolling, I think, and this happens to me, I don't know if we'll get into the pantser versus plotter, that stuff, but I have a similar process with the writing of the book as I do with the editing, and that's I just break it all down into smaller pieces.
mm,
And the other thing I didn't mention too is before I do any zero draft, I spend a lot of time on character development. Um, with the Chameleon Killers, the first in the series, so I had to build up the whole police force, and what I do is I build up police force, any friends, associates, or whatever I want around that, and then I will figure out who my killer is, and then the rest of the suspects and the victims come as the story comes. Like I will decide, when I decide what the murder is, I'll go, now I need a victim for that murder. And then I need someone else in the story who's similar to the killer so that we can throw some red herrings people's way, that kind of thing.
I love that. Now, um, you are a member of our AutoCrit Pro community, and I was wondering, how does AutoCrit fit into your writing process?
Okay, yeah. The first thing I did was I used the beat sheet from AutoCrit for the Chameleon
Mm,
Killer. Because I have access to a million beat sheets, and I said, well, I'd taken all the training, tons of training with AutoCrit, and I said, let me try their beat sheet. It went really well. And then I tend to write in Word. It's just where I'm
mm,
comfortable. So really, I didn't come back to AutoCrit until it was time for um, what I call the AutoCrit edits, which are
mhm,
going through out of the, I don't know, there must be 20 different things you can do these days. I mean, the first thing I did is I did a read the story analyzer to see what it thought of my protagonist. And I was very happy when it said that she had tremendous growth in the story and yada, yada, yada. So I was like, okay, that's good. Then I looked at all the different reports AutoCrit has. Like I said, like 12 to 14 of them I thought were really important for me to go through,
mhm,
but I
mhm,
like to get my numbers under what I'm being compared to. So there is no like just plain crime fiction in the AutoCrit edits, but there was thriller, there was mystery. I was more thriller than mystery, so I just followed the thriller as my comparison. So
mm,
if the thriller had whatever 3,000 duplicate words in their story, and I went into this book with 5,000, my goal was to get to like 2,500 and get under their number.
mm.
Figuring I didn't want to spend the rest of my life editing the same book, so I figured I got to pick out numbers that are reasonable because it's impossible with any crime story not to use duplicate words because you're constantly canvassing neighborhoods, right? They're the same words used all the time. You're running interrogations, it's all that kind of stuff. So some of that has to be, but I did use, I had a syllabus source with me, and I did at times when I saw the same word just over and over and over again, try to use some similar words that, would read a little bit differently, but it didn't go overboard on that either. I didn't try to, like use one word only in the story. It was, okay, if I've used this word 400 times, how about we say we use the 300 and we use these three other versions 100 each too, so that you have a restaurant, you have an eatery, you have a bar, you have a tavern, that kind of thing. So and
Yeah, I
just to keep so the story is not just the same words over and over and over again.
No, I think that's an interesting point because we don't want to take away your unique voice. We don't want to take away your storytelling style. We just give you kind of suggestions on places to strengthen. It's up to you to take those suggestions or not. And when it comes to repeated words, sometimes those words are repeated because that is the best word for what you're trying to say. Now, you could look at it from a line editing sentence point of view and be like, is this sentence necessary? Am I being repetitive on the, for if I look at this whole scene, does it need to be here? That's line editing and figuring it out. But I think that one of the things I love about AutoCrit is that I don't have to worry about it taking away my author voice. I don't have to worry about it touching my story unless I want to make those changes. I need a lot of creative control over my story. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about our tools is it leaves it in our hands to decide what
Exactly.
edits we're making and which ones we're ignoring.
Joined AutoCrit, I think it was in 2021 or two,
Hmm.
and I can't believe the growth of the platform just in that time. I mean, it's incredible that, and like I say, I tend not to like to write in web things, but I've done some short stories in the writers area, but just the amount of tools you've added is just incredible.
Oh,
And
we love to hear that.
I have a lifetime membership, so it's one of the few lifetime memberships I have, and it's been worth every penny.
Ah, that's what we love to hear. We like to say that we are built for authors by authors. We want this to be useful for people that are writing books, that are seeking publication. And I'm glad to see that we've hit the mark there because as an author myself, it is an essential part of my toolkit. Now, as we wrap up this coffee break session, I'm going to put you on the spot. I do this to all my guests. I would like to pretend that we just met in real life and we're chatting about books and you are going to tell me why the next book that I pick up when I go to Barnes and Noble later is going to be a Rick Mendez book.
Okay, well, I'm going to assume that you like to read crime books,
Yep.
and then I'm going to give you the community killer with a very strong protagonist, Detective Alma Rossi, who is I grew up in the Boston area, so she hails from the North End area of Boston. And so you're not going to get a paper thin protagonist. I really try to dive into her and, give her emotion and all, give the scenes, just really try to get her reactions to things because I like to write the crime books in first person. And so
Mhm.
when you are Alma in the story, it's one of those things that I've been working with the developmental editor on this is you've got to let her reveal what she's thinking in many situations because the reader wants to know, you know what I mean? And then for
That's
that, there's, for the rest of the story, like I say, there's some interesting suspects. Um, the introduction of what I call the him scenes, which is the killer that we don't identify till later, those add tension because you're following him as he actually does the murder. And so how he plans the murder, how he tracks down the person he wants to murder, all that stuff. And so I think that's another thing that you'll get this set of scenes where we watch the murderer, and then you get a set of scenes behind that where there's Alma trying to solve the murder with less information the reader has right now, because all she sees is the end result, right? Oh my God,
mhm.
this person was murdered. She doesn't see how he built up to it, and that's part of her investigation is to figure out all those kind of things.
Amazing. Well, and you are available where? Where could we buy this?
It'll be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, Atmosphere Press will of course have it, and I don't really restrict it from anywhere. So it's,
Okay.
any of the other big platforms that sell books, I'm sure will pick it up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Rick, for sitting down with me today for this coffee break. I appreciate your time, your insights, and sharing your work with us. It has been a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you again to our listeners for tuning in. Keep writing, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.